I'm Lori Bennear, Assistant Professor of Environmental Economics and Policy at the Nicholas School and also secondary appointments at the Sanford School of Public Policy and the Department of Economics. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about very nascent work that we are just beginning to work on. And by we, I mean myself and Jonas Monos, who just spoke, and Jonathan Weiner, who's a professor at the Law School and at the Sanford School of Public Policy and the Nicholas School. We probably have a team that has the greatest number of appointments throughout the university. So since we're really just starting on this, I'm going to spend more time thinking about the first couple questions that Billy posed to us. And the first is sort of what's the underlying policy question that's of interest and why is it really of increasing interest at this time? So we know just geologically from the U.S. Geologic Survey that there's an estimate, they estimate that the Arctic Circle contains about 13% of the undiscovered oil resources. It's about 90 billion barrels, and something like 33% of the undiscovered gas resources, just shy of 1,700 trillion cubic feet. And about 84% of those hydrocarbon resources are offshore. So the first thing that makes this interesting is we're talking about a lot of hydrocarbons that are available, okay? The second is that the potential to access those resources, right, and extract them and transport them has been increasing very rapidly for a variety of reasons. One of which, the great irony of this, is that because of climate change, because of CO2 emissions from burning hydrocarbons, we're actually having reduced polar ice, making it easier to actually access those hydrocarbons with a longer drilling season, and also making shipping across the Arctic possible in a way that it wasn't even just a few years ago. So climate change is contributing to our ability to access these yet untapped resources. In addition, relatively high oil prices and the maintained instability in some of the other oil-producing regions of the world have continued to put pressure on certain governments, particularly in the United States, for exploration and development of domestic energy resources. Technological change in offshore oil drilling has expanded rapidly, although we might be reaching, sort of a peak in the learning curve there. But the Norwegians have moved from the North Sea, which was already turbulent, cold, and nasty, to the Norwegian, and now up to the Barents Sea. So our ability to actually build infrastructure that can withstand these kinds of conditions is making it increasingly possible to go after these hydrocarbons. And then there's potential for increased sources of energy from terrestrial Arctic too. With climate change, there might be an increasing accessibility of the methane hydrates from the terrestrial Arctic. So here what I think we have that makes this such an interesting and compelling emerging issue is that we have these critical environmental drivers of change, right, that also have potentially significant environmental consequences, right? So on the one hand, changing environment is making it easier to go after this, but going after this has potentially significant environmental consequences, and these two things are very much linked. The other thing that I find really interesting about the Arctic is that as a place, it's imbued with a lot of meaning for people, based largely on our imaginations, because most of us have never been there and will never go to the Arctic. But when I teach the undergraduate environmental policy class, we talk about the meta-narratives of environmental policy, these big stories we tell ourselves about, what it means to be an American and help explain where we are in the world and what we should be doing. And it seems like in Alaska and in the Arctic is where two of these very powerful meta-narratives always seem to collide head on, and this will continue to be true for the Arctic. The first is sort of America as, the country of the cowboy, of the pioneer, right? We're going to go out there and do things that were never done before. So we can go to the Arctic and extract these hydrocarbons because we have the technological power to do it, right? And that runs right up against this notion of Alaska and the Arctic as this last frontier of wilderness, this pristine area that needs to be preserved, that's fragile, and that holds this special place in at least some people's imaginations, right? So you have all of these things happening sort of at the same place. And the changes that have happened with respect to the climate that are making hydrocarbon access easier are starting to change those perceptions, right? In addition to the two meta-narratives, there's also the sense that the Arctic is this place that's far away that none of us will ever go to or visit, and that it's really a concern of a few nations' governments, right? And really, like within the United States, it's just like Alaska's, and the northern territories of Canada. And now we're really seeing an increasing interest in the Arctic from around the world. The Chinese are very interested, both in Arctic oil exploration, but also in the potential for shipping across the Arctic to lower their shipping costs to both US and European ports. The South Koreans are interested. Suddenly, the Arctic is something that's on many more people's radar. And this is, I think, over time going to put increasing pressure on the political institutions, which are not well developed to deal with some of these potential sources of conflict. So the project that we have proposed takes a look at this question along four potentially different angles. The first, which is already a little bit underway, is a comparison of existing oil and gas, offshore oil and gas regulations among the Arctic countries, because under the law of the sea, right now, if you're drilling in a country's jurisdiction, their laws will be the ones that apply. So getting a better sense of what are the similarities and differences across different regulatory regimes among the Arctic countries. Then critically analyzing those comparative regulatory approaches, really with an eye to which ones appear to be more robust in the face of changing technological and economic and climate circumstances, right? Because when we're thinking about the Arctic, we're thinking about a highly dynamic place. And so what can we learn about these different regulatory regimes in terms of which ones might be better fit to deal with the dynamicism of this area. And again, looking past just oil to alternative regulatory regimes that have been used for other complex systems. So not just limiting ourselves to thinking about what have we already done in the Gulf of Mexico or in the North Sea, but are there flexible, robust approaches to regulating risks, low probability, high consequence risks, that we can learn from other sorts of complex systems. And then finally, to explore options for cooperative multinational policy regimes among the circumpolar countries and potentially others. So the Arctic Council, there's also an Arctic Circle, but the Arctic Council is the sort of primary cooperative body right now among the different Arctic countries. As I mentioned, there's increased